They say that if you want to see a person's true face, you don't look at them when they're winning, you look at them when they think you've already lost. For 6 years, I was the shadow behind Julian Vane. I was the one who scrubbed the blood off his reputation, the one who turned his failing real estate firm into a multi-billion-dollar empire in the heart of Miami. I was his confidant, his right hand, his irreplaceable partner. Irreplaceable, that's a funny word, isn't it? It's the lie powerful men tell you so you'll work 18-hour days while they take the credit. Before I continue with the story, I need to know who I'm talking to. Look at the screen right now. If you're the kind of person who can watch a woman get stripped of her dignity, her career, and her future and just scroll away, then this story isn't for you. You're exactly like Julian. But if you've ever felt the sting of a knife in your back from someone you gave your life to, then you owe it to yourself to hit that subscribe button. Don't let my story be buried like he tried to bury me. And for those of you who won't subscribe, go to the comments. Tell everyone why you're okay with the betrayers winning. Lament about why you prefer to stay silent. I want to see your excuses. My name is Elena. I remember that final Tuesday. The Miami sun was blinding, reflecting off the Biscayne Bay like a million shards of broken glass. I was wearing a $3,000 suit Julian had bought me for my last birthday. At the time, I thought it was a gift. Now, I realize it was a uniform, a leash. I walked into Vanguard Lux at 7 a.m., just like I had every day for 2,000 nights. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and ego. I knew every stone in that building. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew which security guards had kids in college and which ones were hiding gambling debts. I was the mother of that office. I kept the peace. I took the private elevator to the 40th floor. The God level, as the new employed staff called it. When the doors opened, the air felt different. Usually, Sarah, the receptionist, would look up and offer a bright "Good morning, Elena." But today, she wouldn't even meet my eyes. She was staring at her monitor, her fingers shaking slightly as she typed. It's a physical sensation, isn't it? That instinctual knowledge that the predator is in the room before you even see him. I walked past the glass partitions, past the conference room where I had closed a $40 million deal just 48 hours prior. No phones ringing, no printers whirring. Just the sound of my own heartbeat thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pushed open the Julian's office doors. He was standing by the window, his back to me. He was looking out at the city he thought he owned. In his hand was a glass of scotch. It was 7:15 inches the morning. Julian? We have the meeting with the board at 9. You need to review the quarterly. Julian interrupting, voice like ice. There is no meeting, Elena. I stood there, frozen. My hand was still on the door handle. I don't understand. The project finalization is today. We've worked on this for
There is no meeting, Elena.
I stood there, frozen. My hand was still on the door handle. I don't understand. The project finalization is today. We've worked on this for understand.
No, you worked on it. And frankly, your work has become problematic. The FBI doesn't think so. They'll be here in an hour, Elena. I told them I was conducting an internal audit and found your, indiscretions. I told them I was heartbroken. What I did was protect my company. You were the one with the access. You were the one with the motive, a girl from the suburbs trying to play in the big leagues. It was only a matter of time before you got greedy.
I really looked at him, and I didn't see the mentor I had loved. I saw a monster, a man who would burn a human being alive just to stay warm.
Leave your badge, leave your laptop. Security will escort you to the service elevator. If you ever set foot in this district again, I'll make sure the DA seeks the maximum sentence.
2 men walked in behind me. I recognized them. I had authorized their background checks. Now, they were grabbing my arms. Julian, look at me. I gave you everything. I saved your father's legacy. He didn't even turn around. He just looked back out at the ocean. You were a tool, Elena. And tools get replaced when they get dull. As they dragged me toward the elevator, past the whispering staff and the cameras that were recording my public humiliation, I felt something snap inside me. The sadness didn't leave, but it changed. It turned into something heavy, something cold. They pushed me out the back door into the humid Miami heat. No purse. No phone. Just the clothes on my back and the crushing weight of a crime I didn't commit. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the black SUVs pull up to the front the feds. He had timed it perfectly. By noon, my face would be on every news channel in the state. The thief of Vanguard. But Julian made one mistake. See, he thought he knew everything about me. He thought he'd cleared my desk of every scrap of evidence. He thought he'd deleted every file. But 3 years ago, when Julian was too drunk to stand and confess to a small mistake he'd made with a contractor, I didn't just listen. I recorded it. And I didn't put it on the company server. I felt the small, hard shape of a microSD card tucked into the lining of my blazer, the same blazer he had bought me. The hunt was on. But Julian didn't realize that he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the bait. The first hour after a betrayal isn't about logic, it's about survival. I didn't go to my car. My car was a company lease, tracked by GPS. I didn't go to the bus station. I didn't even go to the main street. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned like I was breathing in liquid glass, until the heels of my designer shoes snapped off on the uneven pavement of an alleyway in Overtown. I stood there, gasping for air, clutching a brick wall that felt like the only solid thing left in the world. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer, violent adrenaline of being hunted. I knew how Julian's mind worked. Right now, he was sitting in that office, playing the grieving mentor for the FBI. He'd be giving them access to my computer, pointing them toward the breadcrumbs he'd spent months baking into my digital life. He'd tell them I was unstable. He'd tell them I had a spending problem. She just wanted the lifestyle she saw me living, he'd say, a fake tear in his eye. I tried to help her, but I guess some people are just born with a hole in their soul. I couldn't go home. My apartment was a glass box in Brickell. By now, there would be a black and white parked out front, and a locksmith would be drilling the core of my front door. Everything I owned, my clothes, my records, the jewelry I'd bought myself to celebrate every promotion, was no longer mine. It was evidence. I found a thrift store 3 miles away. I traded my broken heels and my $3,000 blazer, the one Julian bought me, for a pair of beat-up sneakers and an oversized gray hoodie. The woman behind the counter looked at me with pity. She saw a broken woman. She didn't see the vice president of a billion-dollar firm. She saw a ghost. I sat on a park bench, the rain soaking through the cheap fabric of my new clothes. I felt light. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't have a phone buzzing with Julian's demands. I didn't have a calendar filled with his meetings. But then, the weight hit me. I had no money. My bank accounts were linked to the company payroll frozen. My credit cards canceled. I had $42 in my pocket and a microSD card hidden in my bra. I thought about calling my sister, but I stopped my finger before I even touched the keypad of the burner phone I'd bought at a bodega. If I called her, I'd be putting a target on her back. Julian wouldn't just stop at me. He was a scorched earth kind of man. He would destroy anyone who gave me a glass of water. I was officially a non-person. In the eyes of the law, I was a thief. In the eyes of the public, I was a scandal. And in the eyes of Julian Vane, I was already dead. I spent my last few dollars at a 24-hour internet cafe. The air smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I sat in a corner booth, the flickering monitor light reflecting in my eyes. I plugged in the microSD card. The file I'd recorded 3 years ago was still there. Julian's voice, slurred but unmistakable.
The foundation on the North Tower. It's soft, Elena. If the inspectors find out, we're done. I paid off the lead engineer, but he's getting greedy. I need you to handle the paperwork. Make it disappear.
I remembered that night. I had handled it by finding a legitimate engineering fix that cost the company millions but saved the building. I thought I was being a good partner. I thought I was protecting him. But as I scrolled through the other files, I'd surreptitiously backed up over the years, files I'd kept just in case Julian's ego ever outran his ethics, I found something new. A transaction. Not from the company but from Julian's private equity fund. It was dated last week. $2 million, sent to a shell company called Icarus Holdings. Julian was smart, but he was arrogant. He used the same naming conventions for everything. Icarus was the name of his first sailboat. I looked at the destination bank for Icarus Holdings. It wasn't in the Caymans, it was local. A boutique bank in Coral Gables that specialized in discreet wealth. He didn't just frame me to hide his crimes. He used the chaos of the investigation to steal more money for himself, and he'd buried the trail under my digital signature. But he made one massive mistake. To authorize a transfer of that size at that specific bank, you don't just need a digital key. You need a physical biometric scan. Or a physical signature on a hard copy authorization form. Julian was in London when that transfer was signed. I knew, because I was the one who booked his flight. If there was a physical paper trail at that bank, Julian couldn't have signed it. Someone else did. Or he'd forged his own signature and had someone drop it off. I knew who his runner was. Marcus. Julian's head of security. The man who had just dragged me out of the building. If I could get my hands on that physical document, I wouldn't just have a recording of Julian being a drunk, I'd have proof of bank fraud that even the FBI couldn't ignore. But the bank was a fortress. And I was a fugitive.
Police are asking for the public's help in locating Elena Vance. Sources say she may be armed and is considered a flight risk.
Armed? I wasn't armed. But Julian was already painting me as a violent criminal to ensure that if the police found me, they wouldn't take me in quietly. He wanted me silenced. Permanently. I looked at the screen. My corporate headshot was plastered across the 11 o'clock news. I stood up to leave, but as I turned toward the door, I saw a black SUV pull up to the curb outside. The driver didn't get out. He just sat there, the headlights cutting through the rain, pointing directly at me. They didn't call the police. They found me themselves. My heart wasn't just beating, it was screaming. Through the grime-streaked window of the cafe, that black SUV looked like a predator waiting for its prey to bolt. I didn't move. I knew if I ran for the back exit, they'd see the movement. If I stayed, I was a sitting duck. Julian was fast. Faster than I'd given him credit for. He didn't just have the feds looking for me. He had his private security men who didn't care about Miranda rights or due process. I reached into the pocket of my oversized hoodie, my fingers closing around a heavy glass soda bottle I'd grabbed from the counter. It wasn't a gun, but it was weight. It was a chance. The door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a long charcoal overcoat that cost more than most people make in a month. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like an executive. It was Marcus, Julian's fixer. He didn't rush in. He walked with a terrifying, measured pace, his eyes locked on mine through the glass. He held up a hand not to wave, but to show me he was empty-handed. Then he tapped his ear. He wanted me to listen. I stepped outside. The cold rain hit my face, and for a second, I felt like I was waking up from a nightmare only to find myself in a deeper one.
Don't run, Elena. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it past the thrift store.
Did Julian send you to finish the job? To make sure the thief doesn't get to testify?
Julian doesn't know I'm here. And if you want to stay alive long enough to see tomorrow's sunrise, you're going to get in the car.
I sat in the passenger seat, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. Marcus drove toward the outskirts of Miami, away from the neon lights of South Beach and into the industrial gray of the warehouse district. Why? You're his lapdog, Marcus. You're the one who dragged me out of the office.
I'm a professional, Elena. And a professional knows when the ship is sinking. Julian isn't just framing you, he's clearing house. He's liquidating Vanguard's assets into Icarus Holdings, and once that money is gone, he's going to disappear. And he's not taking me with him.
I looked at him. In the dim light of the dashboard, I saw the truth. This wasn't a rescue. This was a business proposition. You want the ledger. You know I have the access codes to the offshore accounts he thinks he hid.
I want the truth. Julian isn't just embezzling. He's been laundering money for the Rosas cartel for 3 years. That Project Icarus you found is not a real estate deal. It's a transition plan. He's selling the company's data, the private financial records of every billionaire client we have, to the highest bidder on the dark web.
My stomach dropped. I hadn't just built a real estate empire. I had unwittingly built a gold mine for the underworld. If that data goes live, thousands of people will be ruined, or worse.
And you'll be the one they blame. Julian has made sure every digital trail for those sales leads back to your IP address. There's something else you need to know, Elena. Something Julian kept in a vault that even I wasn't supposed to see.
He handed me a tablet. On the screen was a scanned document, a birth certificate from a small hospital in North Carolina, 30 years ago. I looked at the names. My mother's name was there, but the father's name wasn't the man I grew up calling Dad. It was Arthur Vane. Julian's father. No. That's impossible. My mother she never said a word.
Julian found out 6 months ago. That's why he started the frame job. He didn't just see you as a liability, Elena. He saw you as a threat to his inheritance. If the board found out you were a Vane, you'd have a claim to half the empire. He's not just ruining your career. He's erasing his sister.
The betrayal I felt before was a spark. This was a forest fire. Every memory of Julian mentoring me, every late-night drink where he told me I was family, every time he called me his closest confidant, it was all a calculated play to keep his enemy close. He knew who I was. He'd known the whole time. We pulled into a dark warehouse. Marcus killed the lights.
I have the physical signature from the bank, the one Julian forged. It's in a locker at the Miami International Airport. I'll give you the key, but I want 50% of what we recover from the Icarus accounts.
I looked at him. I didn't trust him. I couldn't trust anyone. But I needed that signature. It was the only way to prove Julian was the one behind the fraud. Fine. Give me the key. Marcus reached into his pocket, but as he did, a red laser dot appeared on his chest. Get down. I screamed. Marcus slumped over the steering wheel. Blood was everywhere. I scrambled for the floorboards, my heart hammering against the metal. Outside, I heard the sound of heavy boots on the concrete. Not police, not feds. A voice boomed through the warehouse, cold and familiar.
I told you, Elena, tools get replaced and brothers don't like to share.
I looked up through the shattered glass. Julian was standing 10 feet away, a suppressed pistol in his hand, looking at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The world didn't go black. It went red. The smell of ozone and copper blood filled the cramped cabin of the SUV. Marcus was gone. He didn't even have time to scream. 1 second he was a man with a plan, and the next he was just, leaning against the horn. I didn't think. If I thought, I'd be dead. I lunged across Marcus's cooling body, my hands slick with his blood, and grabbed the door handle. I tumbled out of the SUV just as a second bullet hissed through the air, punching a hole in the leather headrest where my skull had been seconds before. I crawled. I crawled under the chassis of a rusted-out freighter, the oil and grime of the warehouse floor coating my skin.
Elena? Don't make this difficult. You were always the smart one. You know how this ends. You're a fugitive. You're a thief. If you die here, it's just a tragic end to a desperate woman's run from justice.
Why, Julian? Not the money. Not the company. Why the lie about our father? The shoes stopped.
Because Arthur loved your mother, Elena. He was going to leave it all to her. To you. My mother spent 30 years being the official wife, while he wrote poems to a woman in the suburbs. I didn't frame you because you were a threat to the company. I framed you because every time I looked at you, I saw the reason my mother died broken-hearted.
The pain of the betrayal hit a wall and turned into a cold, hard diamond of rage. He didn't just ruin my life. He ruined my mother's. He'd kept us in the dark while he sat on a throne that was half mine. I saw it then. Beside the freighter's wheel, a flare gun, part of the emergency kit Marcus must have kept. I didn't wait for a clean shot. I didn't care about clean. I rolled from under the truck, leveled the plastic orange gun, and pulled the trigger. The warehouse lit up in a blinding crimson magnesium glow. Julian screamed, shielding his eyes as the flare bounced off a stack of chemical drums behind him. I didn't stay to watch him burn. I ran. I burst through a side fire door into the Miami rain. I didn't head for the street. I headed for the canal. I hit the water before the first shout of his guards reached the door. The current was cold, pulling at my clothes, trying to drag me down into the muck of the Everglades, but I fought it. I fought it because I had a name now. Elena Vane. I dragged myself onto a muddy bank 3 miles downstream. My clothes were shredded. My skin was blue. I looked like a drowned rat, shivering under a bridge while the city of Miami sparkled in the distance like a cruel joke. I reached into the hidden pocket of my leggings. The micro SD card was still there, But the key Marcus promised me. It was back in that SUV, or in Julian's pocket. I was truly alone. I had no money, no ally, no key to the evidence, and now the most powerful man in Florida knew I was alive and coming for him. I thought about ending it, just walking into the deep water and letting the tide take me. It would be so quiet, no more running, no more lies. But then I remembered the way Julian looked when the flare went off. He wasn't a god. He was a man who blinked when the light got too bright. I pulled out the burner phone. It was waterproof, barely. 1 bar of service. I checked the news.
In a shocking update, police have discovered the body of Marcus Thorne, head of security for Vanguard Lux. Sources say he was murdered by Elena Vance during a botched extortion attempt. Vance is now considered armed and extremely dangerous.
He'd done it. He'd pinned Marcus's death on me. I wasn't just a thief anymore. I was a murderer. Most people think that when you hit rock bottom, you've reached the end. They're wrong. Rock bottom is the only place where you can see the foundation of the building you're about to knock down. Julian thinks he's erased me. He thinks I'm a ghost haunting the swamps. But a ghost doesn't need to sleep. A ghost doesn't need a bank account. And a ghost can walk through walls that a person can't. I looked at the skyscraper in the distance, the Vanguard Tower. My tower. Enjoy the view from the 40th floor, Julian. Because it's a long way down. And I'm going to be the one who pushes you. I opened the phone's browser and typed in a private IP address I had memorized years ago. It wasn't a company site. It was a private server for the Icarus project. Julian thought he controlled the data, but he forgot that I was the one who set up the encryption protocols. I typed in the master password. My mother's name and the year I was born. The screen turned green. Access granted. I didn't have the physical signature yet. But I had something Julian didn't know existed. I had the back door. I could see every dollar he moved, every email he sent, and every person he paid off. Suddenly, a notification popped up on the screen. A new email, sent just seconds ago from Julian's private account to an encrypted address. Subject: the asset is terminated. Proceed with the Miami port shipment at midnight. The port. Midnight. Tonight. Julian wasn't just hiding money. He was moving something physical. Something worth killing for. The port of Miami at midnight isn't the city the tourists see. There are no neon lights here. No mojitos. No salsa music. There is only the smell of diesel, salt, and the cold, hard business of things that don't want to be found. I was a shadow moving through a forest of steel. I had stolen a high-visibility vest and a hard hat from a construction site 3 blocks back. In this world, if you look like you belong, people stop looking at your face. My pulse was a drum in my ears. Every time a crane hummed or a truck hissed its air brakes, I pressed myself against the cold ribs of a shipping container. I was looking for the Icarus mark, Julian's private code. I checked the burner phone. The GPS tracker I'd embedded in Julian's private logistics software was pinging. Pier 14. Container 88 Alpha. What are you moving, Julian? You have billions. What is worth the risk of a federal port? I saw them. 4 men. They weren't port workers. They wore tactical gear. The kind of silent, professional killers Julian kept on his unofficial payroll. And in the center of them, looking entirely out of place in his tailored overcoat, was my brother. I climbed a stack of crates 30 yards away. Looking through a pair of discarded binoculars I'd found in a pierside trash bin. Julian was checking his watch. He looked nervous. For a man who just inherited a kingdom, he looked like he was waiting for a death sentence. The container doors swung open. I expected to see crates of gold, or maybe the physical data Marcus had mentioned. But the container was empty. Or, it looked empty. Until Julian stepped inside and pulled a false floor panel. Underneath were paintings. Dozens of them. Wrapped in industrial plastic, but the frames gold-leafed, ornate, ancient caught the moonlight. I recognized one from a history book I'd read back in college. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. The Rembrandt stolen from the Gardner Museum decades ago. Julian wasn't just laundering money. He was laundering history. He was the middleman for the greatest art heist recovery in the world. He was selling the unsellable to the 1% who didn't care about the law, they only cared about owning what no one else could have. I held my burner phone steady. Click, 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 High-resolution photos of Julian Vane standing over stolen masterpieces. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. This was a direct ticket to a maximum security prison for the rest of his natural life. I had him. I had the evidence that would erase him. But as I turned to climb down, my foot slipped on the rain-slicked metal of the crate. A heavy iron chain rattled against the side of the container. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Below me, the tactical team froze. Julian's head snapped toward my position. Check the crates. Now. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a way out. The pier was a dead end. I could hear their boots hitting the metal, climbing up toward me. I looked at the water. It was a 40-foot drop into a churn of black waves and industrial propellers. I waited for the pain. I waited for the bullet to find my spine. But instead, I heard a scream from below. I looked down. One of Julian's guards was slumped on the ground. A second guard was clutching his throat, falling back into the darkness. Someone was shooting at them. From the shadows of a nearby crane, a figure emerged. He was dressed in black, moving with a fluid, terrifying grace. He looked up at me. Even through the mask, I recognized the eyes. Marcus. It was impossible. I'd seen him die in the SUV. I'd seen the blood. The figure held a finger to his lips, then pointed toward the water. Julian didn't kill me, Elena. He killed my twin. And now, he's going to wish he'd finished the job. Heat. It was the first thing I felt. A wall of orange flame erupted from the fuel truck, turning the midnight pier into a hellscape. The shockwave knocked me backward, my lungs screaming for air that wasn't filled with soot and diesel. I looked down. Julian was being shielded by his remaining guards, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He looked at the burning container, millions of dollars in stolen history turning to ash, and for the first time, I saw him lose control. He wasn't the calm billionaire anymore. He was a man watching his skin burn. Go, move. The voice came from right behind me. A hand gloved, strong grabbed the collar of my vest and yanked me toward the edge of the crate. It was him. The man who looked like Marcus. The man who wasn't dead. We leaped. Not into the water, but onto the roof of a moving automated transport vehicle. We skidded across the metal as bullets pinged off the frame around us. Who are you? I saw Marcus die. I saw the blood. My name is Elias. Marcus was my brother. He was the clean one. I'm the one they sent to the places that don't exist. He leveled a submachine gun over the edge of the vehicle and fired a controlled burst, blowing out the tires of the pursuing SUV. Julian Vane didn't just kill my brother. He killed my leverage. Now you're the only thing left that can hurt him. So you're going to stay alive, whether you like it or not. We ended up in a basement in Little Havana. It smelled of stale coffee, gun oil, and the kind of dampness that lives in the bones of old buildings. Elias stripped off his tactical vest, revealing a map of scars that told a story much darker than mine. I sat on a wooden crate, my hands finally stopping their shake. I looked at the burner phone. The photos were saved. The Icarus backdoor was still open. Why help me? You could have just taken the data and disappeared. Because Julian Vane has a list. My brother was on it. You were on it. And I'm on it. In my world, you don't run from a list. You kill the man holding the pen. He tossed a folder onto the table between us. Inside were surveillance photos of the bank in Coral Gables, the one where the forged signature was kept. You want that paper? It's the only thing that proves the fraud was his, not yours. But the bank is on high alert. Julian knows Marcus or someone like him might come for it. He's moved the physical document to a private vault. To get in, you don't just need a key, you need a heartbeat. Julian always thought I was the organized one. He thought my value was in my spreadsheets and my memory. He never realized that I had spent 6 years learning how to bypass every security measure he ever bought. He doesn't need my heartbeat. He needs his own. But he's arrogant. He uses a top-tier biometric lock from Vanguard Tech, a subsidiary I helped design. I pulled up the back door on the phone. Elias, I can't get us into the vault from here. But I can do something better. I can trigger a critical failure in the bank's HVAC system. At 3 a.m. the temperature in that vault is going to spike to 110 degrees. The fire suppression system will register a threat to the sensitive documents and automatically cycle them to the external courier port for emergency preservation. You're going to make the bank hand us the evidence? I'm going to make the bank beg us to take it. We waited. The minutes felt like hours. I watched the thermal feed of the bank on my phone, 90 degrees, 100, 110. A notification flashed, emergency protocol activated. Asset relocation in progress. It's working. Let's move. We arrived at the courier port, a discreet, armored slot at the back of the bank. I held my breath as the mechanical gears whirred inside. A heavy, fireproof canister slid out into the tray. I grabbed it. My hands were trembling as I broke the seal. Inside was the document. The original authorization for the $12 million transfer. I looked at the bottom. The ink was dark. The loops of the J in Julian were perfect, too perfect. It was a forgery, but a masterclass one. But then, I saw something Marcus hadn't mentioned. Something Elias didn't know. Attached to the back of the document was a small, handwritten note on Vanguard Lux stationery. The handwriting wasn't Julian's. It was my mother's. It said, "Arthur, he knows. He knows about Elena. Please, protect her. He's coming for us both." The date on the note? 2 days before my mother died in that accidental car crash 10 years ago. Julian didn't just kill Marcus. He didn't just frame me. He murdered our mother. And I had just led Elias and Julian's trackers straight to the only proof that could hang him for it. The light was blinding. Red and blue strobes bounced off the wet brick walls of the alley, turning the world into a fractured, disorienting nightmare. This is the Miami-Dade Police Department. Drop the bag. Hands behind your head. My heart felt like it was going to burst through my ribs. I clutched my mother's note to my chest, the paper crinkling under my fingers. Elias had his gun drawn, but he was pinned behind the rusted frame of a dumpster. "Elias, we can't shoot at cops. If we do, there's no coming back. We'll be hunted for the rest of our lives. Look at their boots, Elena. Look at their stance." I looked. They were wearing MDPD tactical vests. They were driving marked cruisers. But they weren't standing like beat cops. They were fanned out in a military flanking maneuver. And their weapons. Suppressed MP5s. The police don't use suppressors for a standard arrest in a public alleyway. These weren't cops. They were Julian's private army, dressed in the skin of the law. He didn't just own the buildings in this city. He owned the uniforms, too. A man stepped out from behind the lead cruiser. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat. It was Detective Miller, the lead investigator who had interviewed me on the day I was fired. The man who was supposed to be building the case against me. "Give it up, Elena. You've had a good run. But the document you're holding? It belongs in the evidence locker." "My evidence locker? How much is he paying you, Miller? Is it enough to cover the murder of my mother? Or did he tell you that part was an accident, too?" Miller didn't flinch. He just looked at his watch. "He's not paying me, Elena. He's investing in me. In 6 months, I'll be the chief of police. And you? You'll be a tragic headline about a disgruntled employee who took her own life in a dark alley." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The law wasn't coming to save me. The system was the very cage Julian had built to trap me. "On my signal, Elena. Run for the basement door. I'll provide cover." "Elias, wait. Go." Elias stood up, but he didn't fire at Miller. He turned the gun toward me. I froze. The world slowed down. I looked into Elias's eyes, the eyes that looked so much like Marcus's. There was no rage there. Only a cold, professional exhaustion. "I'm sorry, Elena. Julian made a better offer. He's giving me Marcus's life back. The estate, the accounts, the name. All I had to do was bring you to the bank. He wasn't the vengeful brother. He was the final piece of the trap. He hadn't rescued me from the pier. He had harvested me. He needed me to unlock the Icarus backdoor and lead him to the physical signature so he could hand both to Julian on a silver platter. The note, Elena. Hand it over." I looked at the document, the proof of the forgery, the last words of my mother. Then I looked at Elias, the man who had pretended to be my only ally. "You want the legacy, Elias? You want to be a Vane?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, industrial flare I'd kept from the pier. "Then you can burn with the rest of them." I didn't strike the flare. I held it over the document, the only physical evidence that could exonerate me and convict Julian. "Miller. If your men take one step closer, I drop this. The signature, the note, the Icarus codes. They're all on this paper and the SD card in my hand. If I ignite this, Julian has nothing to hold over the board. He loses everything. And you? You'll just be a dirty cop with no billionaire to protect you. Miller looked at Julian, who was watching from a black sedan at the end of the alley. Julian stepped out, his face pale. Don't you dare, Elena. That's our father's history you're holding. No, Julian. It's your obituary. I moved my thumb toward the striker. A standoff is a test of who values their life less. Julian looked at me across the alley, and for the first time in 30 years, he wasn't looking at an assistant, he was looking at his blood. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew that the fire in my eyes wasn't just adrenaline, it was the same vain ruthlessness that had built his tower. Back them off, Julian. Or we all find out what $12 million looks like when it turns to smoke. Miller, stand down. Let her go. Julian, she has the evidence. If she walks out of this alley, we're both— I said let her go. If that document burns, the merger fails tomorrow morning. I'll lose the chairmanship. I'll handle her my way. The sea of black uniforms parted. It was a narrow corridor of wolves, but I walked through it. I didn't look at Elias. I didn't look at the guns. I walked straight to the end of the alley, my thumb still hovering over the flare's striker. I didn't run. If you run, they shoot. I walked until I hit the main road, hailed a yellow cab with a hand that was finally blissfully still, and disappeared into the neon veins of Miami. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to the one place Julian would never look, the basement of the Miami Public Library. It was 2 a.m. The night janitor was a man I'd helped with his citizenship papers 3 years ago. He didn't ask questions. He just unlocked the computer lab and gave me a thermos of black coffee. I spread the documents out on the scratched plastic table. My mother's note. The forged signature. The Icarus codes. I realized my mistake. I had been trying to survive. I had been reacting. And as long as you are reacting, you are losing. Julian's empire wasn't built on money. It was built on perception. The board of Vanguard Lux didn't love Julian. They loved the stability he represented. They loved the 12% year-over-year growth. If I wanted to destroy him, I didn't need to kill him. I needed to make him unstable. I opened the Icarus backdoor. I didn't look for the money this time. I looked for the schedule. The merger with the European conglomerate, Aegis Group, was set for 9 a.m. To the world, I was a thief. To the FBI, I was a murderer. I couldn't clear my name with a handwritten note and a recorded confession. Julian would just call them fakes. I had to make Julian confess publicly. And I had to do it using the very system he used to frame me. The Trojan horse. I didn't delete the Icarus data. I modified it. I changed the destination of the $12 million from the offshore accounts to a series of trust funds set up for the families of the construction workers Julian had cheated over the years. But I didn't trigger the transfer yet. I timed it to coincide with the exact moment Julian would sign the merger. The bait. I sent an anonymous encrypted message to the CEO of Aegis Group, not with the evidence, but with a question. Ask Julian Vane about his sister. The execution. I didn't have Marcus. I didn't have Elias. I had something better. I had the ghost protocols I'd built into the building's security 3 years ago. You want to play the grieving brother, Julian? Let's see how you handle a reunion. I spent the rest of the night transforming. I cut my hair with a pair of library scissors. I used the janitor's bleach to turn it a shocking, industrial platinum. I put on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses and a charcoal blazer I'd taken from a lost and found bin. I wasn't Elena Vance, the fugitive. I was Claire Eris, the junior auditor from the Aegis Group. As the sun began to bleed over the Atlantic, I stood in front of the Vanguard Tower. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know where you are. I'm coming for the note. Don't go inside. It was Elias. He wasn't at the bank. He wasn't with Miller. He was standing across the street, watching the entrance. I looked at the revolving glass doors. I looked at the shadow of Elias in the distance. I didn't run away. I walked straight toward the doors. But as I pushed through, I felt a hand on my shoulder. A heavy, familiar hand. Going somewhere, sis? The hand on my shoulder wasn't Elias's. It wasn't a guard's. It was a hand I had known since I was 22 years old. It was Julian. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't calling for the police. He was smiling, that perfect, practiced billionaire on the cover of Forbes smile. We were standing in the center of the lobby, surrounded by hundreds of employees, and I was paralyzed. Platinum blonde? It's a bit cliché, don't you think, Elena? It makes you look desperate. I felt the barrel of something small and hard press into my ribs. A subcompact pistol, hidden beneath the sleeve of his coat. We're going to walk into that elevator. We're going to go to the 40th floor, and you're going to help me sign the most important deal of my life. Because if you so much as sneeze without my permission, I will tell the world you attacked me, and my security will ensure you don't live to see the trial. I looked at the security desk. My face, the old me, was still on the monitors, but with my hair cropped and bleached, and the glasses, I was invisible in plain sight. I was a ghost being escorted by its murderer. The elevator doors closed. The 40th floor button lit up like a countdown. I expected to walk into a boardroom full of European executives. I expected the Aegis Group. But the boardroom was empty, except for one person sitting at the head of the table. He was an old man. Frail, with an oxygen tank wheezing beside him, but his eyes were like flint. Arthur? It was Arthur Vane. Julian's father. The man the world believed had been in a vegetative state in a Swiss clinic for the last 3 years. The man Julian had used as an excuse to take total control of the company. Sit down, Elena. You have your mother's eyes. And her stubbornness. He's been the one pulling the strings, Elena. You thought I was the villain? I'm just the messenger. My father didn't want you ruined because of some inheritance grudge. He wanted you ruined because you're the only person alive who knows where he hid the rest of the stolen art. The heist didn't start with Julian. It started 30 years ago with Arthur. The asset Julian mentioned at the port wasn't the paintings. It was the ledger that catalogued 40 years of global art theft. A ledger that Arthur had entrusted to my mother. Where is it, Elena? Your mother died protecting that book. Don't make the same mistake. Give it to me, and Julian will make the embezzlement charges vanish. You'll be wealthy. You'll be free. I looked from the dying old man to the monster he'd raised. I realized that my mother didn't die in an accident. She was executed because she wouldn't give them the map to their graveyard. And they thought I had it. I looked at the folder in my hand, the one with the forged signature and the note. They thought that was the ledger. You want the book, Arthur? It's not in a vault. It's not in a bank. I stood up, ignoring the gun in Julian's hand. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. I uploaded the contents of the ledger to the Vanguard server an hour ago. It's set to go public the moment the merger signature is verified by the digital notary. If you kill me, the world sees everything. Every painting, every buyer, every politician you've bribed. Julian's face went from pale to ghostly. He looked at the clock, 8:55 a.m. The Aegis Group would be stepping out of the second elevator in 5 minutes. You're bluffing. You wouldn't destroy the company you built. Try me, Julian. I'm a Vane, remember? We don't just build things, we burn them when they stop serving us. Check the server. Now? Julian scrambled for his laptop. His fingers flew across the keys. I watched his eyes. I watched the moment the blood drained from his lips. She's not bluffing. The file is there, it's encrypted, but it's titled The Vane Legacy. The doors to the boardroom opened. The CEO of Aegis Group walked in, flanked by lawyers. Mr. Vane, we're ready to sign. But first, unquote, who is this young woman? She's not on the attendee list. Julian looked at me. I looked at the pistol tucked in his waistband. I looked at the dying old man in the chair. I'm the auditor. And I'm here to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. The room was a vacuum. $4 billion was on the table, and the only thing standing between Julian and the life he wanted was a woman he had tried to erase. The CEO of Aegis, a stern woman named Madame Dubois, adjusted her glasses. She looked at me, then at Julian. She could smell the tension. It was the scent of a dying empire. Mr. Vane? I asked who this is. My team doesn't appreciate surprises during a final closing. I'm the voice of the audit, Madame Dubois. Julian felt it was necessary for me to be present to ensure the transparency of the Vane family's historical assets. I looked at Julian. I could see the sweat beading at his hairline. He was holding the pen, but his hand was trembling. He knew that if he didn't sign, the Aegis Group would walk away and Vanguard would collapse under the weight of the FBI investigation. But if he did sign, my digital dead man's switch would trigger. She's a consultant. A specialist in internal risk. Please sit. Let's finish this. Julian began to sign the documents. Page 1, page 2. With every stroke of the pen he was digging his own grave. I sat directly across from Arthur. The old man was watching me with a mixture of hatred and something I didn't expect, admiration. He saw the monster he had helped create. He saw that I wasn't just my mother's daughter, I was his, too. You think you're winning, Elena. But when this goes public you go down with us. The world won't see a hero. They'll see the girl who helped the Vanes hide their sins for 6 years. I've spent my whole life in the shadows, Arthur. I'm comfortable in the dark. Are you? On the table my phone sat face up. The screen was black, but beneath the surface, the countdown was at 60 seconds. Julian reached the final page, the global transfer of liability clause. The moment he signed this, he was legally responsible for every asset in the Icarus ledger. Don't do this. We can fix it. I'll give you the chair. I'll give you everything. You already gave me everything, Julian. You gave me the reason to hate you. The clock hit 0. Suddenly, the massive LED screen at the front of the boardroom, the one meant to display the merger celebration, flickered. It didn't show the Vanguard logo. It showed a map, a global map of red dots. What is this, Julian? That, madam, is the Vane legacy. Every red dot represents a stolen masterpiece. The Rembrandt in the Tokyo vault, the Vermeer in the Swiss bunker. And look. I tapped my phone, and the screen shifted to a live feed of the Miami port. The burning container. Julian's face, illuminated by the flare, standing over the stolen art. At this exact second, those files have been delivered to the Interpol database, the FBI, and every major news outlet in the Western Hemisphere. The merger you just signed isn't a business deal, Julian. It's a confession. The Aegis lawyers scrambled to their feet. Madame Dubois looked at the screen, then at Julian with a look of pure disgust. The deal is dead. And so are you, Mr. Vane. You think you've won? I'll kill you before they even get through the door. But Julian didn't look at the door. He looked at Arthur. The old man wasn't wheezing anymore. He had reached out and unhooked his own oxygen line. He was smiling. If the Empire falls, Julian, the bloodline ends with it. Arthur reached into the side of his wheelchair and pulled a small, silver remote. He didn't look at the police. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked at the floorboards, the ones I knew were rigged with the building's emergency scuttle protocol for destroying sensitive data. I built this cage. I'll be the one to burn it. He pressed the button. In the dark, titles don't matter. Billionaire, vice president, thief. Under the red glow of the emergency lights, we were just 3 shadows in a sinking ship. Madame Dubois and the Aegis lawyers had scrambled for the stairwell the moment the floor shook. They were gone. But Julian hadn't moved. He was still standing by the window, the pistol dangling limply in his hand. And Arthur? Arthur sat in his wheelchair, breathing the stale, smoky air of the room, looking satisfied. You did it, Elena. You actually did it. You destroyed the only thing that made us important. Important? We were never important, Julian. We were just expensive. There's a difference. I walked toward him. I didn't care about the gun anymore. The building was dying around us, a bullet seemed redundant. I spent 6 years trying to earn a seat at this table. I worked twice as hard as you for half the credit, thinking that if I just made enough money, I'd finally belong. But looking at you now, I realized I was trying to join a suicide cult. You think I wanted this? You think I liked being his puppet? He told me if I didn't get rid of you, he'd cut me out. He told me you were the mistake that would ruin the Vane name. I was protecting us. Protecting us? You killed my mother, Julian. You watched her car go over that bridge and you went back to your penthouse and opened a bottle of wine. She loved you. Even after what Arthur did to her, she told me stories about the bright boy she used to babysit. She thought you were different from him. She died believing you had a soul. Julian flinched like I'd slapped him. The gun clattered to the floor. He sank to his knees, his face buried in his hands. He told me she was going to the police. He said she was going to take everything. I didn't know. I didn't know she still cared. She was a weakness, Julian. Just like Elena is. You're crying over a woman who was nothing but a footnote in a ledger. Look at what you've become. A groveling child. I turned my gaze to the old man. The asset. The man who had started the fire 30 years ago. You're the one who's a footnote now, Arthur. The world doesn't care about your art anymore. They care about the fact that you're a murderer. By tomorrow morning, the Vane name won't be on buildings. It'll be a curse word. I'll be dead by tomorrow morning, girl. I win either way. No. You don't get to die a legend. You don't get the Scuttle Protocol exit. I reached into my blazer and pulled out the small oxygen canister I'd swiped from the emergency kit in the hallway. I didn't give it to him. I hooked it up to the building's localized fire suppression vent. The police are on the roof. The FBI is in the lobby. I'm going to make sure you stay alive just long enough to see the handcuffs click. I want you to feel the weight of the cage you built for me. Julian looked up, his eyes wild. He looked at the gun on the floor, then at the window. 40 stories up. I can't go to prison, Elena. I'm a Vane. We don't survive in cages. Then you should have thought about that before you built one for me. Julian scrambled toward the gun. I didn't stop him. I didn't move. But he didn't point it at me. He pointed it at the glass window, the reinforced, hurricane-proof glass. If I'm going down, I'm going down on my own terms. He pulled the trigger. The glass didn't shatter, it spider-webbed. A massive, white crack split the view of the Miami skyline in half. One more shot, Elena. That's all it takes. The pressure will do the rest. Do you want to fly with me? Physics doesn't care about your family drama. When Julian blew that hole in the glass, the 40th floor became a vacuum. I slammed my body against the heavy mahogany boardroom table, my fingers digging into the wood until my nails bled. Across the room, I watched Julian. He was standing on the edge of the abyss, his coat flapping violently like the wings of a broken bird. He looked at the city lights below, then back at me. It's beautiful, isn't it? The fall? He let go. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the gale. I expected him to plummet, but a hand strong, gloved and familiar reached out from the darkness of the exterior ledge and caught him by the collar. Elias. It was the new Marcus. He hadn't been waiting across the street. He had used the chaos of the scuttle charge to scale the building's maintenance rail. He pulled Julian back into the room, throwing him onto the carpet like a sack of unwanted mail. I waited for the FBI to burst through the doors. I waited for the hands in the air. And the handcuffs. But the men who entered weren't wearing FBI windbreakers. They were wearing black masks. No insignia. No names. Elias. Who are these people? The FBI was intercepted 5 floors down, Elena. Detective Miller didn't just work for Julian. He worked for the people Julian owed, the Rosas cartel. They don't want the ledger to go public. They want to reclaim their investment. The Scuttle Protocol Arthur triggered hadn't just destroyed data. It had cut off the police's access to the elevators. We weren't being rescued. We were being harvested by the very people Julian had been laundering for. Elias didn't look at me, he walked straight to Arthur. The physical ledger, Arthur. I know it's not in the computer. I know the digital file Elena uploaded was a decoy to draw out the feds. Where is the original? I froze. My heart stopped. Elias was right. The digital file I'd uploaded was a decoy, a shell program I designed to look like the ledger to trigger the arrests. But I didn't have the real one. I don't have it, Elias. I told you, my mother died because she wouldn't give it up. Then you're useless to me. And Julian is a dead man walking. The only person left who knows where it is. He looked at Arthur. The old man was coughing, blood speckling his lips, but he was laughing. You think I'd tell a mercenary? I'd rather watch this building collapse with all of us inside. The building is collapsing, Arthur. You have 5 minutes to tell me where it is, or I leave you here to be crushed by your own name. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my hand. A private message popped up on the Icarus backdoor. The real ledger isn't a book. Look at your mother's note again. Read between the lines. Literally. I pulled the crinkled note from my pocket, the one from the bank. I held it up to the emergency red light. I saw it. Under the ink of her handwriting, there was a secondary layer, a microprint etched into the fibers of the paper. It wasn't a note to Arthur. It was a map. But as I realized the truth, the floor beneath us gave way. I didn't fall 40 stories. I fell 15 feet through a ceiling that had become a trapdoor of pulverized concrete and shattered dreams. I woke up on the 39th floor, the floor that was supposed to be the Vane Heritage Museum. It was dark. The only light coming from the red emergency beacons and the flickering neon of the Miami skyline through the jagged holes in the wall. My lungs felt like they were filled with powdered bone. I checked my hand, the note. It was still there, gripped so hard my knuckles were white. I held it up to the pulsing red light again. My mother's handwriting. It was a distraction. It was a camouflage. I looked at the microprint etched into the fibers. It wasn't a map of a place. It was a frequency, a sequence of numbers. It's not a ledger. It's a key. I stood up, my legs shaking. This floor was filled with crates, empty frames, pedestals waiting for the stolen art. Julian was moving at the port, but in the center of the room was a statue. A replica of the veiled truth. I looked at the note. The frequency. My mother was a librarian before she met Arthur Vane. She believed that the best place to hide a secret was in plain sight, inside something no one would ever want to break. I approached the statue. It wasn't stone. It was a high-density polymer, designed to withstand fire, theft, and time. I pressed my thumb into the veil of the statue, tracing the sequence from the note. The base of the statue hissed. A small compartment slid open. Inside wasn't a book. It was a single, ancient-looking brass key and a photograph. The photograph was of my mother. She was holding me. I couldn't have been more than 2 years old. On the back, in her real handwriting, it said, "The truth is the only thing they can't take from you, Elena. Use it to set yourself free." I finally understood. The ledger wasn't a list of stolen art. The veins were small time compared to the truth. The brass key belonged to a safety deposit box in the Federal Reserve of Miami, a box my mother had opened in my name the day I was born. And the frequency? It was the encryption key for a global offshore server that held the digital fingerprints of every shadow transaction the Vane family had facilitated for 40 years. It wasn't just the Roses cartel. It was senators. It was judges. It was the very men who were right now authorizing the FBI to stay back. The Vanes weren't just thieves. They were the bankers for the world's most powerful monsters. And my mother had given me the leash to every single one of them. You wanted the legacy, Julian? Here it is. Elias, Elena. I know you're down there. I can see your blood on the rubble. Give me the note, and I'll pull you up before the building settles. I looked at the brass key. I looked at the photograph of my mother. I'm not coming up, Elias. I didn't head for the stairs. I headed for the service elevator. The one that ran on a separate manual hydraulic system. The one I had spent 6 years maintaining just in case. I'm going to the vault. And by the time you reach me, the world is going to know exactly who pays your salary. As I stepped into the dark elevator shaft, I heard a second voice from above. Not Elias, not Julian. Voice. She's at the statue. Kill her and bring me the key. It was Detective Miller. He wasn't waiting for the cartel. He was already in the building. And he wasn't alone. In the dark, beneath the world Julian thought he owned, I found my strength. The service elevator moved with an agonizing, groaning slowness. Above me, I could hear the thud of Miller's men hitting the 39th floor. They were tearing the statue apart. They were looking for a book, a ledger, something they could burn. They were looking for a physical object. They didn't realize that in the 21st century, the most dangerous weapon in the world is a string of numbers. I opened my burner phone. I wasn't using the Icarus backdoor anymore. I was using the legacy encryption key my mother had hidden. Miller. You want to be chief of police? Let's see how the voters feel about your retirement plan. I didn't send the files to the news. Not yet. I sent a single, encrypted teaser to Miller's personal phone. A photo of his signature on a cartel payroll from 6 years ago. I watched the red receipt turn blue. I stepped out into the sub-basement. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and wet concrete. I found the main junction box, the one that controlled the building's external communication arrays. Julian had cut the power to the elevators, but he'd kept the satellite link active for his own escape. Arrogance. It's always the same with men like him. They can't imagine a world where they aren't connected. Target 1, the Roses cartel. I didn't report them to the feds. I sent their current location, the coordinates of their secure peer, to their biggest rivals in the Medellin syndicate. Target 2, Detective Miller. I leaked his offshore account numbers to the Internal Revenue Service's high-priority tip line. Target 3, the Vane Board of Directors. I sent the photos of the stolen Rembrandt to their personal spouses. If I'm going down, I'm taking the whole table with me. I reached the private terminal. I inserted the brass key. It didn't open a box of gold. It unlocked the final transmission. I looked at the screen. 40 years of vain history. My mother hadn't just been a victim, she had been the record keeper. She had kept every receipt as a life insurance policy that never got paid out. Until today. I hit send all. The data didn't go to one reporter. It went to a decentralized blockchain. It went to every server on the planet. It was a digital Big Bang. Within seconds, the Vane legacy was being downloaded by 1 million people. Mom, I whispered. It's done. I didn't turn around. I knew the silhouette. I knew the weight of the footsteps. You did it. You actually pressed the button. I turned slowly. Julian was standing there, drenched in rain and blood, holding a piece of jagged glass. He looked like a man who had already died and just hadn't fallen over yet. There's nothing left, Elena. No company. No name. No future. Do you feel better now? I feel clean. The cartel is on their way down here. Miller is dead. Elias took care of him. But Elias isn't here to save you, Elena. He took the money from the Icarus account and disappeared. It's just you and me, the last of the Vanes. From the darkness behind Julian, a second figure emerged. It was Arthur. He was out of his wheelchair, crawling across the wet floor like a wounded animal, a look of pure, primal hunger in his eyes. The key. Give me the physical key. It's the only thing left. The key doesn't work anymore, Arthur. I changed the locks. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you die. They're wrong. It's the lives you didn't get to live that haunt you in the dark. When the sub-basement ceiling gave way, I didn't feel the weight of the concrete. I felt a strange, cold weightlessness. I remember the water black and saltbitter rising to meet me. I remember seeing Julian's hand reaching out, not to grab me, but to grab the brass key floating in the debris. Even at the end, he was reaching for a ghost. I don't know how I got out. Maybe the pressure of the burst pipes pushed me through the ventilation shaft. Maybe I just wasn't done yet. I clawed my way through a jagged hole in the sidewalk 2 blocks away from the Vanguard Tower. I stood there, shivering in the pre-dawn light, a ghost in a gray hoodie. Behind me, the skyscraper the god level was a smoking jagged tooth against the Miami sky. The 40th floor was gone. I looked at my hands. They were covered in soot and someone else's blood. But they weren't shaking anymore. I walked to a small cafe on the edge of the design district. It was 6 a.m. The world was waking up to a different reality. On every television screen in the window, I saw the same headline. The Vane Papers, Global Corruption Network Exposed. I saw the photos I'd taken at the port. I saw the spreadsheets of the cartel laundries. And I saw the names of people who thought they were untouchable being read out by news anchors with trembling voices. I saw Madame Dubois being led out of her hotel in handcuffs. I saw the police chief in waiting, Miller, being found in the wreckage of the tower. And then, I saw the image that stopped my heart. Rescue crews have recovered the body of billionaire Julian Vane from the sub-basement. He was found clutching an antique brass key. His father Arthur Vane remains missing and is presumed dead. You got your legacy, Julian. You died holding the only thing you ever truly loved. A piece of metal. I sat on a park bench overlooking the bay. I pulled the photograph of my mother from my pocket. It was water-damaged, the edges curling, but her smile was still there. I realized then that my mother didn't want me to be a Vane. She didn't want me to have the money or the power. She wanted me to have the truth because the truth is the only thing that can't be taken away by a merger or a scuttle charge. I had spent 6 years trying to prove I was worthy of a man who wasn't worthy of me. I had traded my soul for a view of the ocean, only to find out the ocean looks the same from the beach as it does from the penthouse. I wasn't a VP anymore. I wasn't a fugitive. I was just Elena. I took the burner phone, the one that held the last of the Icarus encryption, and I walked to the edge of the pier. The world thinks it knows the whole story now. They think the Vane Papers are the end of it. They think they've caught the monsters. But they don't have the last file, the one I didn't upload. The file that lists the new names, the ones who stepped in to fill the vacuum the moment the Vane Tower fell. And as I turned to walk away from the water, I saw a familiar black SUV pull up to the curb. Not Julian's. Not Miller's. The window rolled down. It was Elias. He looked different. Better. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the Icarus transfer. Elias, the world is a messy place, Elena. You cleared the board, but you left the pieces. I'm starting a new firm. We could use someone with your unique perspective on risk. I looked at him. I looked at the power he was offering, the same power that had killed my mother. I'm done with firms, Elias. Are you? Because there's a man in Zurich who just found out you're still alive. And he's much, much worse than Julian. Elias sat there, framed by the leather and glass of a world I'd just tried to burn down. He wasn't the broken brother anymore. He was the survivor. He was the man who had learned the most important lesson the Vanes ever taught. In a vacuum, the most ruthless person becomes the king. The man in Zurich. He doesn't care about the art, Elena. He cares about the silence. You've become a very loud woman in a world that prefers whispers. I looked at the open car door. It was an invitation back into the cage. A different cage, perhaps. One with better views and a more honest master. But a cage nonetheless. You think I'm afraid of Zurich? I've spent my life being afraid of men in suits. I watched the most powerful man in Miami drown in his own basement clutching a piece of brass. You're offering me a seat at a table that's already rotting. I'm offering you protection. Without me, you're just a target. No, Elias, without you. I'm invisible, and you of all people should know how dangerous a ghost can be. I didn't get in. I stepped back. I watched the black SUV pull away, its tires whispering against the pavement like a secret being kept. I let him go. I let the new empire drive off into the sunrise without me. I walked back to the water's edge. I reached into the pocket of my hoodie and pulled out the last thing I had left of the Vans. Not the key. Not the note. The micro SD card. The one with the legacy files, the ones I hadn't uploaded. I didn't destroy it. I didn't throw it into the bay. I walked to a nearby payphone, a relic of a world that didn't track your every move. I dialed a number I'd memorized from my mother's old address book. A woman in Virginia. An archivist for the International Court of Justice. My name is Elena. I have the rest of the Vane papers. But I'm not giving them to you for a headline. I'm giving them to you for a trial. I mailed the card. No return address. No signature. Just the truth, sent to the only people who couldn't be bought by the man in Zurich. People ask me now if it was worth it. They see the empty lot where the Vanguard Tower used to stand and they talk about the tragedy of a fallen dynasty. They look at me, if they see me at all, and they see a woman who lost everything. They're wrong. I didn't lose my career. I escaped to prison. I didn't lose my family. I found my mother's voice. And I didn't lose my power. I just changed its form. You see, Julian and Arthur thought power was something you built out of steel and glass. They thought it was something you could hold in your hand like a key. But true power is the ability to walk away from the table when the game is rigged. It's the ability to look at a billionaire and realize he's just a man who's afraid of the dark. My name is Elena. I am the daughter of a woman they couldn't break and a man they couldn't hide. I am the silence after the explosion. And I am finally free. You've been with me for 4 hours, you've seen the betrayal, you've seen the fire. You've seen what happens when the little person decides to stop being small. If you're still sitting there, wondering if you should take a stand in your own life, then you've already heard the answer. Don't be like Julian. Don't be the person who watches a life be dismantled and does nothing but wait for the next chapter. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of that concrete, then you know what to do. Subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but for the next person whose story needs to be heard. And if you're one of those people who will walk away now, who will close this video and forget the name Elena Vane, then go to the comments. Tell the world why you prefer the comfort of the cage. Tell us why you'd rather watch the villains win. I want to read your excuses. I want to see the faces of the people who stayed silent. Because remember, I'm always watching the back door.